Every now and then, I guess we all think realistically about that day when we will be victimized with what is life's final common denominator. That's something that we call death. We all think about it, and every now and then I think about my own death, and I think about my own funeral, and I don't think of it in a morbid sense. And every now and then I ask myself, what is it that I would want said? And I leave the word to you this morning. If any of you are around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. And every now and then I wonder what I want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. That's not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness. And all of the other shallow things will not matter.
When we listen to the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when Dr. King's voice rings out across the void of time and space and reaches into our souls in the here and now, I get goosebumps. Anyone else get goosebumps? I have a physiological reaction to the power of his voice. There is no doubt in the power of his voice. There is no doubt in its power to move others, and there is no doubt in his power, the power of his conviction. His voice, that deep baritone, rich in texture, that cadence which both soothes and compels us, it renders us speechless. It gives us goosebumps because he speaks with such authority, with such clarity of insight, his words and his majesty seemingly conferred from a different place, a transcendent place. But a place not out there, not beyond or on high, it comes from a place within. A place within him that is convicted, sure, confident, and mightily righteous. Convicted about the power of the people in the pews to whom he is preaching, convicted about the necessity of this fight, and convicted in the invincibility of his people's dignity. And that voice, its power and its conviction, when I hear it, I can sense in me almost fear. A feeling of being afraid, of being overwhelmed by what he is asking me to do, paralyzed by what he is asking me to consider. I feel afraid of his sureness because surely no one can be that sure. His conviction. I admire it and I envy it and I have been afraid of it. But this fear is what Dr. King would have called abnormal fear. He writes, normal fear protects us. Abnormal fear paralyzes us. Normal fear motivates us to improve our individual and collective welfare. Abnormal fear constantly poisons and distorts our inner lives. Our problem is not to be rid of fear, but rather to harness it, master it. In some sense, I have always known that there is a fear in white folks which makes us abnormal, which paralyzes us and owns us, which poisons us and distorts our inner lives. There has always been this fear in me, that my whiteness has made me soft, unformed, untested, immature in the ways of conviction. When I was small, I read the story of Ruby Bridges over and over. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, even as a girl, the story of this one small black girl who desegregated her school alone. In 1960, escorted by armed guards who walked a gauntlet of taunts and threats and hatred and vitriol every day to the school's doors. But that very real story planted those very real seeds of the truth, those seeds of self-awareness about my spiritual immaturity, about my whiteness. I would never be as strong as Ruby. I would never be that small and innocent being who had been bathed by her mother and clothed by her father, kissed by her sister, and sent out the door to face a white mob which thought I was worth nothing. I would never need as deep a well of courage. I would never need as fierce a belief in my own belonging. Being white means I remain unformed and untested against the callous and scarring racial bigotry of this world. I have never needed to insist upon my dignity, to insist upon what I deserve against a culture designed to say otherwise. And that is a chasm between my life and the black experience in America, which I can never, should never, attempt to own as my own. So how to address the inadequacies of my moral fortitude, how to address the shortcomings in my spiritual immaturity, how to address this abnormal fear, which makes me resist engaging with that power that I possess. We must become convicted. We must all be in tune with that sure and confident and moral righteousness which tells us right from wrong, which knows that we, as Unitarian Universalists, are called to a higher moral standard. Dare I say, an obligation to be convicted of our own power and the need to fight like hell for one another's dignity. Dignity is at the core of the theology of Unitarian Universalism, that we each deserve to live without shame, without fear, whole and happy and honest. Dignity in American society often looks a lot like respectability. It often looks a lot like class. It looks like money and education, but those are the trappings of an elusive dignity, bestowed by external forces. No, true dignity comes from within. Those of us who live on the margins of our culture, those forced to the edges of institutions and mainstreams which bestow external dignity, we know what it is to claim oneself as undefiled and without shame, deserving and exalted. How many of us here today have had to shout, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine," in spite of all the bushels and the baskets that have tried to snuff it out? When I revisit images of the civil rights movement, when I watch the videos of the fire hoses turned on teens, when I see blood pouring forth from the heads of those on the Pettus Bridge, when I see men and women lying on linoleum, covered in food, and thrown to the ground for a burger, what I see is people convicted in their dignity, convicted of their dignity, fighting like hell to protect that inner light. In the words of Bayard Rustin, they ring out to me when an individual is protesting society's refusal to acknowledge his dignity as a human being, his very act of protest confers dignity upon him. Bayard Rustin, the civil rights icon you may have never heard of. How many of you have heard of Bayard Rustin? Oh, my good you people. Arguably the most important organizer in the decades-long movement. You may have never heard of him. He was black and Quaker and gay. Pushed to the margins of the movement's public face for who he loved, Mr. Rustin knew a thing or two about claiming oneself as undefiled. Knew a thing or two about being convicted in one's power, one's right to exist. His inner light burned hot and bright, despite so many leaders of the movement like Adam Clayton Powell and even Reverend Dr. King himself disavowing him for his sexuality. For the longest time, I actually thought the origins of this little light were Quaker. I thought Quakers had written it. It seemed only natural that the Society of Friends would be the ones who wrote a song about this little light of mine, since they are the ones who believe in the inner light in each of us. A divine light, the Quakers believe, powerful enough to illuminate the deepest corners of our souls. It was a light that is of God, and each of us has a bit of it. Each of us contains something of the divine within. If there is something of God in me, it is obligated to honor the something of God in you. This is what Unitarian Universalism is about, an obligation to honor each other and every other living soul, how to hone that belief, sharpen it into a weapon of righteous justice. It is Unitarian Universalism that insists on the dignity of others, insists so hard you are convicted. Do you feel prepared to be convicted? So much so that on the day you too are victimized with life's final common denominator, that when we gather round to tell the stories of your life, to eulogize you, will they say she was convicted in the creation of a new world order, one where justice reigned supreme and all lived in dignity, with enough food, enough house, enough health care, enough learning, enough love to kindle not a spark of God inside, not a candle or a pillar, but a bonfire, a forest fire, that each of us has enough, was respected enough to know it would never go out. And if you are afraid of what is being asked of you, fear at the magnitude of such a commitment, if you feel fear at the size of this obligation, you must learn to harness it, master it, and to learn that conviction should be shared. You needn't be convicted alone. It is a project best done among a group of like-minded individuals such as ourselves, to hold conviction, to be convicted as truly and as deeply for as long as you can until the doubt creeps in, until the exhaustion edges your strength out, and then you will look here, to this place, to these people, for we will hold your conviction for you until your strength returns and you can pick it up again. We will do this over and over and over because this is what we owe each other. We insist here in this place upon the dignity of others. We insist in this place upon honoring that of God in each of us. We insist in this place until we are convicted and our fear of our inadequacies gives way to certitude, and we would be transformed. The voice of Martin Luther King Jr. calls out to us from beyond the grave, its power and its authority, its spiritual maturity and moral clarity. Where we once were afraid of it, now we are convicted by it. Where we once were envious of it, now it is our turn to embody it. May we protect one another's lights with a fierce love and devotion. May we honor one another's dignity, one another's right to flourish in this world. And may our funerals be filled with the cries of loved ones eulogizing our love for humanity and the ways we tried to make it right. Blessed be, and amen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.